Isn't it wonderful, church? We have not only heard the word, we have seen the word so that God can move our hearts and transform us. What a wonderful gift we've had today. Thank you. So this Sunday, we find ourselves mid-Lent. So how you doing? How you doing on what you said you would do this Lent? It's a time to kind of assess this. You know, later in the liturgy, the people in the RCIA program are going to go through what's called the scrutinies, which sounds like a harsh word, but it's looking inside and seeing how you're doing. And we're blessed to have people in the RCIA because when they get asked that question, we've got to ask that question as a community and say, are we worthy witnesses to these people wanting to join our church? And are we willing to scrutinize and to go through the scrutinies together? So we've got a lot of blessings this day already in our liturgy. As was spoken, people in the time of Jesus felt that physical infirmity was a sign of sin. So they saw somebody with their cane or whatever, they would say, well, did that person sin or was it their parents? Who's the one responsible for this? Now, in our day and age, we don't have that response. At least I'm sure most of us don't. I'm going to make an assumption that we don't have that response. We're more enlightened, that we wouldn't think of looking at somebody who's ill or has an obvious illness and say, well, they sinned or their parents sinned. Or are we? Or do we not continue to make judgments? It may not be about physical ailments. We're enlightened about that one. But what about the kind of thinking that continues to make judgment? You know, when Jesus saw the man born blind, he didn't see a physical blindness. He saw a human condition that he was sent to alleviate. He saw a person in need of God's mercy and God's compassion. And what do we see, church? Who do we see? When we see that person on the side of the road with a sign saying help, and do we go into our pocket? Or do we say to ourselves, well, what if I give him something or her something and they're just going to go and drink and they're not going to do something with it? Church, that's not for us to say. It's not for us to say. Do we see the human need that can alleviate because we are believers in Jesus? Some people still look at women who've been raped or sexually abused and say, well, if she hadn't been dressed like that and out by herself, we blame the victim, whether it's a man or a woman, because men are also raped. We blame the victim. That kind of thinking, that kind of judgmental thinking is still with us. So I might be able to stand here kind of, okay, I'm not like those guys who didn't understand physical ailment, but it doesn't mean I don't need to scrutinize myself. Doesn't mean I don't need to ask myself questions about the kind of thinking that makes judgments rather than seeing who Jesus sees, an opportunity to alleviate the conditions of oppression and harm and need in our world. And church, as long as I think that way, that judgmental way, I build a wall. And us is over here, and them is over there. And of course, us is right. My kind. my social class, my whatever, my color, my whatever. As long as I am involved with that kind of judgmental thinking, I don't look deeper into the needs of what will change our economic system, our cultural system, our political system that keeps a permanent underclass. You know, like our prisons, we've got a permanent working class in our prison. The inequity of the racial justice related to the prisons. As long as we hold on to that kind of critical thinking, I can excuse myself. We can excuse ourselves from stepping up and making the changes we need to make. I'm going to say that again. As long as I hold on to that judgmental thinking, I can excuse myself. And you can excuse yourself from stepping up and making the change that will help someone be set free, that will turn the world upside down, or I'd rather say right side up, like Jesus intended it to be. We need to be right side up Christians, because if we think like our upside down world, we're going to do upside down things. So let's be right side up Christians. Okay? So when Jesus looked at that blind man, he saw the human condition that he was sent to alleviate. He saw the imprisonment that he was sent to set free. And he asked you and I, as his followers, to do the same. He asked us to do the same. So I'd like you to take out your heart stones, your red stones that you got. And if you didn't get one, raise your hand and the ushers will. Okay, I have an extra one, Carla. Raise your hand high so they can see you, so everybody has a heart stone. I've got one more. There you go, sir. You got one. Okay. There you go. You know, in the olden days when I was a child, which was quite a long time ago, as you could tell what it took to get me up off the floor, that Lent was about giving things up for 6 weeks. And then after 6 weeks, I could go and get them back, because I did it for Lent. In reality, church, Lent is about transforming our hearts in ways that we cannot go back to. We need a stone over here too. That we cannot go back to come Easter Sunday. So I'm going to ask you to think about what heart transformation is God asking of you this Lent? Because it may not be what you chose to do. So I said at the other masses, one of the reasons I don't give up drinking my scotch every day for Lent is that I know that if I gave it up come Easter Sunday, I'm going to go back to it. Thank God, God doesn't ask me to do that. But Doug does say to Marion, where are you in your critical thinking? Where are you in your judgment of others? When you see someone, do you see what I see? Do you see the human condition that I'm asking you, Marion, to do something about? So I'm going to ask you to hold your stone as your heart. This is your heart stone, and you're going to take it home with you. And I'm going to ask you to have God be there with you as you hold your heart stone. What is God telling you in today's experience of the Word? Challenging you to change a way of thinking so that you see what Jesus sees, that you see who Jesus sees. Think about that. You know, there's some addictions in this world that are socially acceptable, and there's some that aren't. So we look at people addicted to drugs or the obvious things, and we criticize them. What about me? What am I addicted to, but it doesn't get judged because it's socially acceptable? Nobody criticizes how much chocolate I eat unless I don't share it. Okay? So I'm going to take a couple moments of quiet. And I'm going to ask you and God in your heart stone to sit together and think about what way of thinking and judging is God asking you to do, to deal with these last weeks of Lent that are going to transform your heart, that come Easter, you'll never be the same. Now, that wasn't a very long time, but you're going to take your heart stones home. If you choose, and you have a right to pass, but if you choose, turn to one person next to you and share a word or a phrase about what God said to you. What is God asking you to change, to transform in your way of thinking? And we'll take just, it's going to be a brief time, so talk fast. Make sure each person has a chance to share. And you have the right to pass. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to, okay? But when you name it out in the world, it makes it more real. So take a minute. Make sure everybody's had a chance to say something. So I'm going to ask for your attention back. I know it's very dangerous to let you start talking to each other, but the teacher in me is still here, so I can wear you down and talk louder than you. So a couple of the things that God has said to me. One is I belong to the Italian Club, and we have dinners at the Colombo Club on Claremont Avenue next to the DMV. And we all know that the food that's left over from those dinners after it's been in the refrigerator for 3 days, they throw it away. And yet at St. Mary's Center and at Friendly Place, there are people who are hungry. And so God put it on my heart to try to work out how to get the food from the Italian Club to the people in need. And I've already started the process, and they said to me, they can't legally take it to a shelter. Somebody can come and pick it up. And I mentioned it at a family gathering, and my sister-in-law is going to help me. But we're going to work a way to get the food to where it's needed. But even more so, what God has put on my heart is that I live in the Laurel District, which is between High Street and 35th in Oakland, up at MacArthur. And we've got a lot more kids who wear their jeans around their knees. What do you call that? Sagging. Okay. Aiden told me to ask the community, they'll tell you. And of course, the grandma and me wants to go and pull their pants up, you know? And it's easy to make judgments about the kids who do that. And yet, in the work at Catholic Charities, in the work that we do in the schools, and Kat, you know this very well, our kids tell us that if they don't wear their pants sagging and they're walking through certain neighborhoods, they're going to be targeted. Because who do you think you are wearing your pants up? You're not one of us, and so we'll target you. What I've learned from them now is when I see a kid with their pants sagging, I still want to go pull them up. That hasn't gone away, but of course I don't do it. But I walk right over to the group of them and say, how you doing? I've lived in the Laurel a long time. You're kind of new around here. Welcome. How you doing today? I see a person who may be dressing like that because it's the only way they can save their life. I see a person who hasn't had to live, who has to live in a world that I never had to live in. I never had to live in that world. It breaks my heart that our children have to live in a world where whether or not they sag their pants means whether or not they get home safe from school. And I pray for them. I pray for them because they are my children. God asked you and I to change how we see, to see like Jesus saw, to see the human condition that we're called as followers of Jesus to alleviate. And I look at Syria and say, I can't do anything about Syria. I can't bring food to the Sudan. And so I think, okay, and I'm 78 years old. I've been a sister a long time. I've done a lot of stuff. It's time for me to sit back and relax and enjoy myself. Well, part of that's true, but I can never step back from being a follower of Jesus. I can never step back from my commitment to make the gospel real. And so, church, we're challenged to have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the heart to love, that the reality of the gospel will be real in our neighborhood, in our time, and in our lives. Let us sing.
I'd like to invite you to sit for a moment.